Now, next up, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at customizing Photoshop, making Photoshop a little bit more comfortable, a little bit more personal to work inside. And what I'm talking about is customizing things like Photoshop's interface, also known as creating workspaces. We'll take a look at that in just a minute. And we'll also take a look at customizing Photoshop's keyboard shortcuts and even Photoshop's menus. So we'll take a look at those last two items in just a few minutes. But first up here, as I say, we're going to take a look at workspaces. And that really is related to the overall Photoshop interface. If you're not sure what I'm talking about, what I mean is the placement of some of our palettes. Usually they're placed here on the right-hand side of the interface, but we can move them around wherever we want. And also the toolbox, which again, by default, usually is going to sit over on the left-hand side. So what the heck am I talking about here? Well, what I can do here is, if you don't know about this already, is I can move my panels around. Now, right now, my panels are docked to the interface. What that means is that they're kind of locked in there. Now, what I can do here is quite literally, I can grab any of the palette tabs here and tear them away and convert any of my docked palettes into floating palettes. So what I could do, for example, is I might decide to have adjustments sitting down in the bottom left corner. And then maybe what I could do is I could take layers and maybe position him up towards the top right-ish of my interface. And I could continue here. I could take color and maybe move him down with masks. I could group those guys together. So now masks and color are grouped together. And I could even do something like take swatches and maybe pull him all the way over onto the left side and dock him over on the left-hand side, something like this. So you can really go crazy, and you can really make Photoshop your own. You can really make it a much more comfortable environment to work inside. You can really set it up the way you want, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So you can go nuts here. You can go crazy, and you can set all this up. Or what you can do is you can make use of Photoshop's built-in workspaces. And now, how do you do that? Well, running across our application bar up towards the top right, you'll see Essentials, Design, Painting, and then we have this double-headed arrow, which is actually a drop-down menu. And inside this drop-down menu, we can actually go and choose a different workspace. So, for example, maybe what I'll do is I'll go and switch my workspace to photography. And what happens here is the Photoshop interface rearranges itself now into the photography workspace. Or I could come back to this drop-down menu and I could say, show me the painting workspace. And again, we would get a slight change in the interface, right? So you can certainly take your time and you can explore through these different interfaces if you want. Or what you can do is you can set up your own custom workspace and then save it so that you can always retrieve it at a later time. Let me show you how to do that. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to switch back to the Essentials workspace just by clicking on the Essentials button there. And it takes me back to where you and I left off. So I have my swatches and my adjustments palettes over on the left-hand side. Layers is kind of floating there in the middle of my screen. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to customize my interface somewhat. And I'm going to do this rather quickly. Now, what you can do on your side is you can go ahead and customize up your interface and set it up the way you want. For example, I just closed out of my styles palette. I don't really use styles very often, but if I do need it, I know that I can just head to the window menu and go and pull open the palette again. I always put layers and paths together. I don't know why, that just seems to work for me. Channels is one of those palettes that I use sometimes, but not all the time, so I'm going to close out of him. And essentially, I guess what I'm trying to say here is the palettes that I use all the time, I try and keep them open on screen. The palettes that I never use and the palettes that I use some of the time, I tend to turn those guys off. I tend to close them. Again, they're always going to be available underneath the window menu, right? Okay, so I've rearranged my workspace here. I've set it up the way I like it. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to head to the window menu and then down to workspace. And then what I'll do here is I'll choose new workspace. Now, you can name your workspace whatever you want. Sometimes I'll name this laptop workspace or at the office workspace or something like this based on location, or maybe it's going to be based on task. Again, digital photography or image touch-up or web design or something like this, right? But I think for now, I'm just going to call this Jeff's workspace, something like that. And I'll go ahead and click on save. And now I've saved my workspace as Jeff's workspace. You can see it there in the top. And also when I drop down this menu, there's Jeff's workspace right at the top. So at any time, I can switch out of Jeff's workspace and into a different workspace, and then head back to my saved workspace whenever I want.